The dust had barely settled on the horizon when Martha heard the heavy footsteps on the porch. She knew those steps. Everyone in 3 counties knew them. They belonged to Colton Wade, the man who owned nearly everything the eye could see from the ridge to the river, and then some. At 6'7", he was a tower of a man, broad-shouldered and silent as the mountains themselves. Martha wiped her flour-dusted hands on her apron and took a breath. She'd been expecting this visit, dreading it really, ever since her father had passed 2 months prior. The small plot of land they'd been working, the 20 acres wedged between Wade's vast empire and the creek, was all she had left in this world. She was 19 years old, alone, and she knew what happened to small holdings surrounded by big ranches. They got swallowed up, one way or another. The knock came firm but not unkind. She opened the door and had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. They were gray, like storm clouds, set in a face weathered by sun and wind. He held his hat in his hands, which surprised her. Men like Colton Wade didn't usually bother with such courtesies when they came to discuss business. "Miss Brennan," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Mai tu no eva word." She stepped aside, and he had to duck to enter her father's cabin. It seemed suddenly smaller with him in it, this giant of a man who made the sturdy furniture look like dollhouse pieces. He stood there awkwardly, still holding his hat, looking around at the neat but sparse interior. Martha noticed his gaze linger on the stove where a pot of stew simmered, filling the cabin with a rich aroma of beef and vegetables. "I'll speak plain, Miss Brennan," he began, his eyes returning to her. "Your father and I had our differences, but I respected him. He was a stubborn man who worked hard. Now he's gone, and you're here alone. This ain't the country for a woman on her own." Martha felt her spine stiffen. She'd heard this before from the neighbors, from the minister, from the men at the general store. Everyone had an opinion about what she should do, where she should go. "I'm managing just fine, Mr. Wade." "I'm sure you are," he said, and there was something in his tone that wasn't condescending. "But winter's coming, and this land needs working that one person can't do alone. I'm prepared to make you a fair offer for the property." There it was. The reason for his visit. Martha felt something crack inside her chest. This land was all she had, the only connection to her parents, both now buried in the small cemetery plot beyond the barn. But she was also a practical woman, raised to face hard truths. She couldn't work 20 acres alone. She had maybe enough money to last through winter if she was careful, and after that, nothing. She looked at Colton Wade, really looked at him. He was waiting for her answer, patient as stone. Men said he was hard but fair, that he paid his hands well and didn't tolerate cruelty to animals or people. They also said he'd been alone since his wife died in childbirth 7 years ago, rattling around in that big ranch house with only his foreman and the hired help for company. An idea formed in her mind, desperate and bold. Her mother used to say that Martha had more courage than sense, and maybe that was true. But courage was all she had left. "I ain't pretty, sir," she said suddenly, meeting his eyes. "But I can cook." Colton Wade blinked, the first sign of surprise she'd seen on his weathered face. "I'm sorry." Martha felt her cheeks burn, but she pressed on. "I know what I am. I got my father's strong features and my mother's plain face. My hands are rough from work, and I ain't the kind of woman men write poetry about. But I can cook better than anyone in this territory. I can keep a house, mend and sew, tend a garden, and work harder than most men half again my size." She took a breath. "You need someone to run your house, and I need security. I'm proposing a business arrangement, Mr. Wade. Mariage in name, partnership in practice." The silence that followed was so complete she could hear the clock ticking on the mantel, could hear her own heart hammering in her chest. She'd done it now, made a fool of herself to the most powerful man in the region. He'd probably laugh, or worse, take pity on her. But Colton Wade didn't laugh. He stood there, his hat still in his hands, looking at her with those storm-gray eyes. Finally, he said, "That stew smells mighty good." Martha blinked. "Sir, the stew. It smells good. Better than anything my cook makes, and he's been with me 10 years. He paused. "You're right that you ain't pretty in the conventional way. But you got honest eyes and a straight spine, and you just showed more courage than most men I know." He set his hat on the table. "May I try some of that stew before I give you my answer?" With shaking hands, Martha ladled stew into a bowl, added a thick slice of the bread she'd baked that morning, and set it before him. He sat down at her small table, his knees barely fitting underneath, and took a bite. Then another. He ate the entire bowl without speaking, then sat back and looked at her again. "Miss Brennan, I'm 42 years old. I got a ranch that needs constant attention, a house that ain't been properly kept in years, and I eat most of my meals standing up or cold because there's always something that needs doing. I loved my wife, and when she died, I figured I'd spend the rest of my days alone." He stood up, towering over her again. "But that was the best stew I've had in 7 years, and you're right that we could help each other. So I'll accept your proposal, with conditions." Martha's heart leaped. "Conditions? You'll have your own room until and unless you decide otherwise. This will be a partnership, like you said, not an obligation. You'll have full authority over the house and the household accounts. And if you're ever unhappy, truly unhappy, you can leave with enough money to start fresh somewhere else. I'll put it in writing." "And my land," she asked, "stays yours. We'll hire someone to work it, and the profits are yours alone." He extended his hand. "Do we have an agreement, Miss Brennan?" Martha took his hand. It was calloused and rough, but warm and steady. "We do, Mr. Wade. But if we're to be married, you should call me Martha." "Colton," he said, and for the first time, she saw the hint of a smile at the corner of his mouth. They were married a week later by the circuit judge, with the foreman and the housekeeper as witnesses. Martha moved her few belongings to the Wade ranch house, a sprawling structure that was indeed in need of a woman's touch. That first night, Colton showed her to a bedroom with a view of the mountains, larger than her entire cabin had been, and bid her good night with awkward formality. Martha lay awake in the darkness, wondering what she'd done. But when morning came and she made her way to the kitchen, she found her element. The kitchen was huge, with a massive stove and more supplies than she'd ever seen in one place. She made biscuits and gravy, eggs and bacon, and strong coffee. When Colton came in from the barn, following the smell, she saw something in his face that made her realize she'd made the right choice. The weeks that followed fell into a rhythm. Colton left before dawn to work the ranch, and Martha transformed the house room by room. She cooked meals that brought the ranch hands to the table early and lingering late. She mended clothes, planted a proper vegetable garden, and slowly made the big house feel like a home. They talked in the evenings, awkward at first, then easier. He told her about the ranch, about his plans and his problems. She told him about her parents, about the books she loved to read, about her dreams of having a place that truly felt like hers. Neither spoke of love, but something else was growing between them, something built on respect and shared purpose. Then came the night of the first snowfall. Martha had made roast chicken with all the fixings, and Colton had actually sat through the entire meal, not rushing off to fix something or check on something. They were cleaning up together, she washing and he drying, when he said, "You know, Martha, I was wrong." She looked up at him. "About what?" "You are pretty. Maybe not in the way some folks measure, but when you smile over a job well done, or when you're concentrating on getting a recipe just right, or like now, with flour on your nose and your sleeves rolled up, you're pretty in a way that matters more. You're pretty in a way that lasts." Martha felt tears prick her eyes. In 19 years, no one had ever called her pretty. "Colton, I know we made an agreement," he continued, setting down the dish he was drying. "And I'll honor it. But I want you to know that this has become more than business for me. You've made this house a home. You've made me remember what it's like to have something to come back to. And if you're ever of a mind to make this a real marriage, not just a partnership, I'd count myself the luckiest man in the territory." Martha set down her dish rag and turned to face him fully. This giant of a man who could be gentle, who kept his word, who had given her security and respect and now, impossibly, was offering her something more. "I think I'm of a mind right now," she said softly. When Colton Wade kissed his wife for the first time, the snow fell softly outside, covering the ranch in white, and inside, two lonely people found something neither had been looking for but both desperately needed. Martha had been right. She wasn't pretty in the way stories described. But she could cook and work and love, and in the end, that was everything.